How to achieve financial freedom. Money is an emotional topic, and most of us have ambivalent feelings about it. On one hand, we want the security and comfort it can bring. On the other hand, we fear financial success will somehow corrupt our ethics. Certainly, TV and movies do their parts to characterize wealthy people as scheming and evil. When was the last time you saw a program that depicted a rich person as the good guy? In religious circles, one often hears the Bible misquoted by well-meaning people. Instead of, "the love of money is the root of all evil," some people tell us that, "money is the root of all evil." Obviously, it is the complete quotation of the Bible which is correct. If you make money your love and you pursue affluence to the exclusion of or at the expense of other values, you have lost, not won. However, let us consider this question. If you could do better, should you? Within the time you've allocated to gainful work, shouldn't you try to accomplish the most you can? I believe the greatest satisfactions of life come to those of us who make a habit of doing the best with what we've got. In fact, doing less than our best has a way of weighing on our psyche. We humans seem to be creatures of enterprise. We're challenged by the seasons. We see the soil and the sun and the rain and the seed, and we feel them urging us to harness them. It's as if life and nature are saying, "Do you have the genius to make something unique of us? We are the raw materials. What splendid things can you create while you are here?" You and I, as creatures of enterprise, shouldn't be reluctant to go for it, for high productivity, for the full employment of our genius, for the full development of our potential in all areas of our lives, including the area of creating wealth. That is the essence of life. Sophisticated people know that it isn't the amount that matters. It's doing all that we can do with our God-given abilities that really counts. This last thought, doing all that we can with what we have, is the essence of a special book. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clason. It's a small book which can be read in one sitting, but it covers the basics. I call it the appetizer for the full discourse on the subject of financial independence, and I recommend it to you. Our actions and acquisitions say a great deal about us. They reveal our philosophy of life, our attitude, knowledge, and thoughts, even our character. Because the outer always reflects the inner, they provide a running commentary on our ability to weigh and to perceive. There's even an adage that says, "What you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying." There's no escaping it. Everything is symptomatic of something. It's either symptomatic of something right or it's symptomatic of something wrong. That's why it's such a wise policy not to ignore symptoms. In case something in your life isn't working as it should, they act as an early warning system, proclaiming to anyone willing to listen that something must change. For example, you could take a look at your lifestyle in relation to your income. If you're spending more than you're making, you may be committing slow financial suicide. Your next toy, purchased on the installment plan, could be no less than another dose of poison served to you on a silver platter. Look at what you're doing with your present income. Are you using it in a wise manner, spending no more than 70% of your total income? Or are you living a few hundred or a few $1,000s a month above your earnings? Take a look at the symptoms before it's too late. I remember saying to Mr. Schoaf, "If I had more money, I would have a better plan." He quickly answered, "I would suggest that if you had a better plan, you would have more money." This is a statement of major importance. You see, it's not the amount that counts, it's the plan that counts. It's not how much you allocate, but how you allocate it. Dividing the financial pie. When was the last time someone taught you how our economic system works? I don't mean in some theoretical textbook way, but in terms of real-life, everyday economics. Has anyone ever told you the wisest way to allocate every dollar you earn? I certainly wasn't taught any of this until Mr. Schoaf patiently took me by the hand and explained it to me. Real-life economics must be one of the most glaring signs in our educational system. I say this because in my travels to lecture throughout the world, I constantly run into otherwise well-educated people. Doctors, lawyers, top corporate personnel, even entrepreneurs, who haven't the vaguest notion as to how to manage their finances. These otherwise sophisticated people may be able to read complex annual reports, but they don't seem to understand everyday economics, the economics of becoming financially independent on a steady, ongoing, ever-predictable basis. As a result of their ignorance, they do not teach this basic economics to their children. And so, generation after generation remains ignorant of the miracle that is the free enterprise system. Indulge me, then, as I take time to review how money is to be allocated for the creation of wealth. Taxes. I realize that the topic of taxes may seem like a strange place to begin the discussion of creating wealth. And yet throughout our lives, whether young or old, we must learn the necessity of paying taxes. And as soon as they have any money at all, our children, too, must learn that when they spend money they immediately become consumers. And all consumers of goods and services, no matter how young, must pay taxes. If a child is only 6 years old when he first goes to the store to buy something that costs $1, the proprietor will ask him for an additional 6 cents. The child may look at the price tag and ask the proprietor what the 6 cents is for. This is the time to offer a full explanation. If he's going to take 6 cents from the child, shouldn't the merchant tell him where it goes? After all, it's his 6 cents. The child might ask the proprietor who keeps it. The merchant would then explain that it's for taxes, that he doesn't get to keep it but merely collects it. The next two obvious questions the child might ask are who gets it and what's it used for. And with these questions come very important answers. The child should be told that because we have all agreed to live together, we call ourselves a society. And for society to function properly, there are some things we cannot do for ourselves alone. For example, we cannot each build a piece of the street. The machinery would be too expensive, and it would take too long to learn how to use it. So we have a government. And a government is made up of people who do things for us that we cannot or do not want to do ourselves. Because the streets, the sidewalks, the police, and the fire department must all be paid for, we've agreed to add some money each time we buy something and give it to the government. Understanding this is important. Our children have to learn this. We have to learn this. We then move on to federal taxes. Here is a good way to explain federal taxes. I call it the care and feeding of the goose that lays the golden eggs. It's so important to feed the goose, not to abuse the goose or tear off its wings, but to feed and care for it. What's that you say? The goose eats too much. That's probably true. But then, don't we all eat too much? If so, let not one appetite accuse another. If you step on the scales and you're 10 pounds too heavy, you've got to say, yes, the government and I are each about 10 pounds too heavy. Looks like we both eat too much. No question about it. Every appetite must be disciplined, yours, mine, and the government's. Hey, we could all go on a diet. Mr. Schoaf urged me to become a happy taxpayer. Now, I must admit it took a while, but I finally did become a happy taxpayer. Part of this transformation occurred when I began to understand the function of taxes and that it is right for everyone to pay his or her fair share. I finally decided I didn't mind picking up my share of the tab for defense. It's so necessary for our safety as a country to keep the international bullies away. Some people say, why bother with all that expensive equipment? They won't come over here. Obviously, those people haven't been reading their history books. Others say, we're not about to pick up the tab for defense. Well then, I suggest they go to a place which doesn't offer defense as part of the package. If one is going to enjoy the benefits, one should pay a share. Jesus, the master teacher, gave some clear advice when he said, pay Caesar first. That's pretty clear. Pay Caesar first. For some reason, he didn't qualify this statement or take the time to criticize the government. All he said was, pay Caesar first. I don't think we need a prophet to interpret that one for us. Now, before you go out and promptly fire your tax advisor, let me add this: don't pay more than you should. By all means take advantage of the incentives. They were given to you as a reward for channeling your money into areas the government thinks help the economy. All I'm saying is that when everything has been computed, all legitimate deductions have been taken, and you reach that last line on your income tax form, whatever the amount, pay it. And pay with happiness, knowing that you're feeding the goose that lays the golden eggs of freedom, safety, justice, and free enterprise. Some goose, some eggs. Furthermore, I believe everyone should pay, even the poorest person. I don't care if it's just $1 a year. That would be enough. The point is that everyone should enjoy the dignity of paying his or her fair share. There is the story about Jesus and some of his disciples who were watching the people come to offer their contributions to the temple. Some came with large amounts. Others gave smaller amounts. Finally, a little old woman came and carefully put 2 pennies in the treasury. Jesus pointed to the woman and said, "Look at this wonderful woman who gave her 2 pennies." The disciples were puzzled. 2 pennies, they exclaimed. Of all the magnificent donations given here today, why are you pointing to this poor woman as an example? Jesus said, "You don't understand, but she gave more than anyone else." They said, 2 pennies, more than anyone else? Explain that to us, Rabbi. He said, "Yes, for her the 2 pennies represented all she had." How remarkable! But let's examine this story further. Sometimes what is not told has a more profound lesson than what is told. Consider what Jesus did not do. He did not take the 2 pennies out of the treasury and return them to the old lady, saying, "Here, old woman, we have observed that you are so poor and so pitiful that we are going to give you back your 2 pennies. What an insult that would have been! She would surely have said, "What's the matter? Aren't my 2 pennies good enough? They represent a considerable portion of what I own. Would you take away my dignity?" Of course, this scene did not occur. And therein lies the most profound lesson. The 70-30 rule. After you pay your fair share of taxes, you must learn to live on 70% of your after-tax income. This is important because of the way you'll allocate your remaining 30%. The 70% you will spend on necessities and luxuries. The 30%. Let's allocate it in the following ways. Charity. Of the 30% not spent, 1/3 should go to charity. Charity is the act of giving back to the community that which you have received in order to help those who need assistance. I believe that contributing 10% of your after-tax income is a good amount to strive for. You may choose a larger or smaller amount. It's your plan. Some people like to give their charity through their church or community organization. Others prefer to give it individually. But whether you administer it yourself or give your money to an institution to administer, be sure to set aside a percentage of your income for giving. The act of giving should be taught early in life. The best time to teach a child the act of charity is when he gets his first dollar. Take him on a visual tour. Take him on a tour of a place where people are truly helpless so that he learns compassion. If a child understands, he won't have any trouble parting with a dime. Children have big hearts. There is a reason why the act of giving should be taught when the amounts are small. It's pretty easy to take a dime out of $1. But it's considerably harder to give away $100,000 out of $1 million. You say, "Oh, if I had $1 million, I'd have no trouble giving $100,000. I'm not so sure. $100,000 is a lot of money. We'd better start you early so you'll develop the habit before the big money comes your way. Capital investment. With your next 10% of your after-tax income, you're going to create wealth. This is money you'll use to buy, fix, manufacture, or sell. The key is to engage in commerce, even if only on a part-time basis. I believe that everyone in this country should engage in some form of capitalism. Here, we believe that capital belongs in the hands of the people. Communism, on the other hand, teaches that capital belongs in the hands of the state. This makes for a great contrast. Communism has little trust in the ability of the individual to make wise decisions. Instead, those in power want to keep everything centralized in the hands of the government. In our country, as in all other countries with free enterprise, we believe that the genius resides with the populace. It's the individual, not the state, who will come up with innovations for goods and services. The pursuit of profit is a powerful incentive to create a life of abundance for everyone. So how do you go about creating wealth with the 10% of your income you set aside for that purpose? There are lots of ways. Let your imagination roam. Take a close look at those skills you developed at work or through your hobbies. You may be able to convert these into a profitable enterprise. In addition, You can also learn to buy a product at wholesale and sell it for retail. Or you can purchase a piece of property and improve it. And if you're fortunate enough to work at a place where you're rewarded for additional productivity, you can work for more income and use this income to invest in an ownership position through the purchase of stocks. Use this 10% to purchase your equipment, products, or equity, and get started. There is no telling what genius lies sleeping inside you waiting to be awakened by the spark of opportunity. Here is an exciting thought. Why not work full-time on your job and part-time on your fortune? Why not? Indeed. And what a feeling you'll have when you can honestly say, I'm working to become wealthy. I'm not just working to pay my bills. When you have a wealth plan, you'll be so motivated that you'll have a hard time going to bed at night. Savings. The last 10% should be allotted to savings. I consider this to be one of the most exciting parts of your wealth plan because it can offer you peace of mind by preparing you for the winters of life. And through the magic of compounding, greatly aided by the new tax-free retirement programs available to every working person in this country, you can accumulate a princely sum over the years. Economics 101. A child's view. The best time to teach capitalism is when a child discovers that he can make some extra money by making himself useful. But beyond giving them an allowance, you can show your kids how to enter the realm of true enterprise. For example, kids ought to have 2 bicycles, one to ride and one to rent. This way they can begin to understand the world of commerce. It really doesn't take much to be in Boosie Ness. It doesn't take $1 million. And what's exciting is that a child can learn the basic business principles of running a General Motors by operating a successful bicycle rental business. Here's another idea. Show children how to buy a bottle of soap for $2 and sell it for $3, right in the neighborhood. It's capitalism in action. Profits, products, and services brought to the marketplace. It's the stuff of which fortunes are made. And teach your child the advantage of being a child. Tell him that some people will buy from him just because he's a kid. Johnny goes a few doors down from your home and knocks on Mrs. Jones' door. Mrs. Jones answers. Johnny says, Mrs. Jones, I have this bottle of soap. It's the best there is. My mother uses it, and lots of people I know wouldn't use anything else. You should really have some. It only costs $3, and since I'm your neighbor, I can take care of you. And besides, I'm just a kid. There, isn't that simple? Here is a small example of commerce in action. Capitalism at its most basic level. Mrs. Jones says, Johnny, I appreciate your coming by. I think your product is good, but really, to be honest with you, I have lots of soap. Let me come in and check, says Johnny, charging forward. Kids know how to overcome objections. They don't stand on ceremony. Mrs. Jones, knowing that her objections are useless, says, Okay, I'll be a customer. Johnny rushes home excited. He says, I've got $3 to spend. If you spend all $3, you remind him, you'll be out of business. Oh, sighs Johnny, a bit disappointed. I see what you mean. You go on to explain, first, you must set aside $2 to invest in another bottle of soap. You must not spend your capital. Capital must be carefully preserved. What would you think of a farmer who ate his seed corn? Dumb farmer, right? So capital, which is known as seed money, must be defended. It's your only chance for another harvest. Johnny can't argue with your explanation, so after airing the matter, he says, Okay, I'll set aside the $2 so I can stay in business and continue to make a $1 profit. But I do get to spend the dollar profit, don't I? Now comes your opportunity to show Johnny the difference between staying poor and becoming rich. You explain, if you spend all your profit, you'll wind up broke and unhappy. Johnny doesn't understand. So you take him to the poorest neighborhood in town and you ask him, Do you want to live like this? No. All right then. You can't spend the whole dollar. Then what do I do with it? First, you must pay your taxes. And for kids this is easy. They pay when they spend, unless they start making serious money, in which case you must teach them about federal taxes. Remember the goose and its eggs. Next, You remind Johnny of the need for charity. Johnny remembers. Oh yes, here is 10 cents for those who cannot help themselves. Now can I spend the rest? No, no, you reply. You'll still wind up broke and just a little less unhappy. Okay, what now? Johnny is becoming impatient. The next 10 cents out of your $1 profit is for the increase of your capital. If you keep setting aside 10 cents for every dollar you make, you'll someday have enough to buy 2 bottles of soap instead of 1. Oh, sure. Now Johnny is really catching on. If I can buy 2 bottles instead of 1, I save myself a trip and sell more bottles. How clever. Next, you explain that some companies will charge you less per bottle when you buy 2. If they sell 1 bottle for $2, they might sell 2 bottles for $3.80. Johnny is excited. Wow, he exclaims. When I sell it, I can even make more profit. And it's true. Everybody benefits from the increase in capital. The company gets to sell 2 bottles at a time, Johnny saves a trip and some costs, and he can keep some of the savings or pass them on to Mrs. Jones as an incentive to buy 2 bottles instead of 1. Johnny says, "Hey, this is neat. Now do I get to spend the rest of my profit?" No, we still need to do one more thing. We're going to rent your money to the bank. How does that work? So you explain. Out of your profit, you need to take out 10 cents and put it into a financial institution, like a bank. They are going to pay you a fee for renting your money. They call it interest. Why would a bank want to do this? Because some projects, like building a tall building or a factory, take more capital than any individual has. So we have a system where all of US can invest our money in a bank so that the bank has enough money to lend for big projects. This helps create more jobs, and that helps everyone. In the meantime, the bank will pay you for the use of your money. What kind of interest do they pay kids? The same as they pay adults. Johnny has a hard time believing this. You mean I get the interest of an adult when I'm only a kid? He asks incredulously. That's right. Your money can grow as quickly as anyone else's. Can I get my money back? Sure, and you'll always get more than you put in. Hey, that's pretty good. Now can I spend what's left? Yes, Johnny, let's go out and have some ice cream. I bet you probably knew all of this. But when I met Mr. Schoaf at age 25, I was just as naive as Johnny. I wonder how many adults were never taught how they can have a wealth plan. If you have children, be sure to explain to them the wealth plan. Show them that if they start using the 70-30 formula while they're young, they will become financially independent at age 40. They could, then, spend the rest of their lives doing only what they want to do. Let me give you the definition of rich and poor. Poor people spend their money and save what's left. Rich people save their money and spend what's left. It's the same amount of money, just a different philosophy. 20 years ago, 2 people each earned $1,000 a month, and they each earned the same increases over the years. One had the philosophy of spending money and saving what's left. The other had the philosophy of saving first and spending what's left. Today, if you knew them both, you'd call one poor and the other wealthy. But saving, like any form of discipline, has a subtle effect. At the end of a day, a week, or a month, the results are hardly noticeable. But let 5 years lapse, and the differences become pronounced. At the end of 10 years, the differences are dramatic. Here's a great philosophy that we can learn from a lowly member of the animal kingdom. It's called the ant philosophy. You know the ants. There's a biblical phrase that urges everyone, especially lazy people, to study ants. Ants are unique for 2 reasons. First, an ant will never quit. If it's headed somewhere and you put an obstacle in its way, it will either try to climb over it or go under or around it. If you remove the obstacle, away it goes. And if you put another obstacle in its way, the ant will look for a way, over, under, or around. How long will an ant keep trying? Until it dies. An ant will never quit. What a lesson! The second reason ants are unique. Guess what ants plan for all summer? That's right, winter. And how much will an ant gather in the summer to prepare for winter? All it can. How intelligent! Do you remember the fable about the grasshopper? He laughed at the ant for storing grain all summer, while he kept leaping about the high grass without a care about the future. When the harsh winter came, he starved to death while the ant had plenty. Rich or poor, the difference is not so much in how much you make as it is in how you use what you make. The choice is yours. Mid-course correction. What do you think of when you think of old people? Do you see people who are somewhat helpless and who live on limited resources? Indeed, this is the predominant condition of the majority of those who fall into the group known as senior citizens. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could change that image? I've come up with a new definition of what grandparents ought to be. The major role of grandparents should be to teach their grandchildren how to be wealthy, cultured, and happy, just like us. Grandparents should not have to say, "I've worked all my life and now I need help." They should be able to say, "I've worked all my life, now I can help." If you are not financially independent by age 40 or 50, it doesn't mean that you live in the wrong country. It doesn't mean that you live in the wrong community. Nor does it mean that you live in the wrong time or that you're the wrong person. It simply means that you have the wrong plan. And you're far from being alone. Most of us get off course. When they send a rocket to the moon, they know the rocket will eventually get a little off course. The first set of guidance systems will not be enough for the whole trip. There will be need for a mid-course correction. You and I are no different. From time to time we, too, must execute our own mid-course correction if we are to become financially independent. After all, wouldn't you want to be the kind of grandparent who can serve as a role model for wealth and happiness? Keeping score. Soon after I met him, Mr. Schoaf asked me if I have a financial statement. I asked, "What is a financial statement?" Mr. Schoaf patiently explained that it's very important to know exactly where you are, without kidding yourself. Only when you know where you are can you possibly have a good plan for going forward to where you want to be. It isn't hard to do. You merely list the value of your assets on one side of a piece of paper and the total of what you owe, or liabilities, on the other side. Then, by subtracting your liabilities from your assets, you come up with a number which constitutes your financial net worth. Now it doesn't tell you what you're worth as a person, only what you're worth in monetary terms. I said to Mr. Schoaf, "My financial statement isn't going to look too good." He said, "It's not important how good it looks. What is important is that you do it." So I put together my first financial statement. I had lots of liabilities. I owed money to my parents, to the finance company on my car, and to several other institutions who expected to be paid monthly. Now, on the asset side, I was scraping. I put down everything I could think of. I even included my shoes. After all, they were worth something. Wow, how embarrassing to have so little, after 6 years of working. No doubt you're doing much better. But even if you're not, you need to have a financial statement. You don't have to post the results on a public bulletin board. It isn't important that you proclaim it to the community. But it's incredibly important that you know the score of your present financial game plan. With your financial statement, start keeping good books of your income and expenses. Have you ever heard the expression, "I don't know where it all goes"? Never be the one to say it. From now on, make a point of knowing exactly where it all goes and where it all comes from. Hey, I found out that just making good money isn't enough. I found out that a person can make $10,000 a month and still go broke. You say, "How can you go broke making $10,000 a month?" It's easy. Just spend $11,000. And believe me, when you make $10,000, it's not hard to spend $11,000. As someone once said, if your outgo exceeds your income, your upkeep will become your downfall. So become master over what you have and what you are. That's where the seeds of greatness are sown. Great wealth, great health, great results, great influence, and great lifestyle. Take interest and even delight in doing the small things well. It will help you become a sophisticated person, one who knows the fundamental strategies for wealth and happiness. There is a biblical saying that if you will be faithful to a few things, you will someday become the ruler over many things. That's it. That's the philosophy that counts. Life is reluctant to hand over fortune and responsibility to someone who messes up his or her paycheck. But assume responsibility for keeping score of your financial life, and you have taken a major step to be trusted with a life of abundance. The wealth and happiness attitude. I used to say, I hate to pay my taxes. Mr. Shoaff said, well, you can live that way if you want to. That's certainly one attitude. I was a bit perplexed. I thought it was the only attitude to have. I wondered what he meant. I used to say, I hate to pay my bills. And he said, well, you can live that way if you want to. I thought it was the only way. I used to say, I hate to part with my money. Mr. Shoaff said, that's one choice for an attitude and lifestyle. Finally, I asked, is there another way to feel about these things? Mr. Shoaff answered, what if you said, I love to pay my taxes because I know that it is my part in the care and feeding of the goose that lays the golden eggs? What if you said, I love to pay my bills, reduce my liabilities, and increase my assets? What if you said, I love to part with my money and put it into circulation where it can help build a dynamic economy? Wouldn't it be a better way if you learned to love to rather than hate to? What an incredible way to look at life. And although it took me a while to learn to say, truthfully, I love to, the change in my life from hating to loving made a tremendous difference. Mr. Shoaff even taught me to pay my car payments with enthusiasm. He said, next time you pay $100 on your installment loan, put a note inside the envelope that says, with great enthusiasm I send you this $100. Smiling broadly, he continued, you won't believe what a stir this will cause on the other end. They don't get many notes like that. But most important, you won't believe what will happen on your end. You'll feel in control, carrying with you a philosophy that brings joy instead of frustration. Financial independence. You can achieve it. Why not start today? All it takes is the discipline to apply the 70-30 rule to your life. Young or old, it's never too late to get on the right track.